Today, I'll be continuing with my schedule discussion and point spread prediction videos. Today, I'll be doing Duke. So, it's been a special last two seasons for Duke's football program uh, because they're not usually a very good football team. They're a basketball school. But these past two seasons, they've won a total of 17 games, and the two seasons before that, they won a total of 5 games. And mm, the coach these past two seasons has been Elko, who has now left them to go to Texas A&M. Uh, and they did lose a lot of players from last year's uh, team, so looks to me like they're probably going to go back to not being a very good football team. Uh, mm, the problems with Duke are number one, they don't recruit well at all, and number two, if they do get a good coach like they just did with Elko, uh, uh, as soon as they have a little success there at Duke, they get a job offer from a better program and they will leave, which is what happened uh, with him. Uh, but it's not all bad news this year for Duke. I did look and was surprised to see that they returned over 50% of their production from last season. They returned 52%. Uh, and compared to most other teams, that's not a lot of production to be returning. But for them to be losing their head coach, it is. Nowadays, with how the transfer portal is, if you lose your head coach, you're probably going to lose a lot more than 50% of your production from last season. And they did get a transfer quarterback to come in who was a four-star recruit from Texas. He was actually their backup quarterback last year to Quinn Ewers. It wasn't Arch Manning, who was the five-star recruit. And Maalik Murphy is his name. He actually started a few games last year at quarterback for Texas when Quinn Ewers was hurt. And he's talented and he could be pretty good for them. So, uh, with him coming in at quarterback and returning uh, mm, over half of their production from the year before, maybe they can uh, not be as bad as they were right before Elko came over to be their head coach. But still, I think it's going to be very hard for them to make a bowl game this year and unlikely. So on this schedule, good news is they don't have to play Clemson, who they blew out last year. That was probably their best win in a really long time. And they start the season on a Friday against Elon, an FCS team. That's one uh, for sure win for Duke this year. They should blow them out easily. Uh, and then they play Northwestern on the road. Northwestern, uh, I think it is going to be better than Duke this time. Uh, and Northwestern has a whole lot of returning production this year. Uh, mm, so seems like a likely loss for Duke, but they could beat Northwestern. Northwestern it, it could possibly go back to being horrible, even with all they have coming back. And then they get two games in the non-conference against Kentucky, Connecticut, and Middle Tennessee that should be close to for sure wins. Not quite 100% sure though, because these aren't FCS teams, but they're not very good. Uh, and then they start their conference schedule against North Carolina at home. That's nice to have at home. Maybe a game that Duke could get a win in. North Carolina loses more actually than Duke does. mm, and will have a much bigger drop off at quarterback, I think, than Duke is going to. Uh, mm, and then they play on the road at Georgia Tech. That's going to be hard for them to win. They could, but Georgia Tech may be more of a middle team in the ACC this year, uh, or better. And they may be kind of an average team overall this year. They've gotten better, better than Duke was before these last two seasons. And then they take a week off before a Friday home game against Florida State. Probably will be a night game, I would think. Now, you might be thinking, with an extra week to prepare and it being a Friday home game, maybe Duke could pull a really big upset in this one. But if you saw my Florida State video, you saw that they take a week off before this one. Uh, Too, so they'll be rested, and uh, they're I think going to be a lot better than Duke is going to be. Even though Florida State probably won't be quite as good as they were last year. I don't really see much of a chance for Duke in this one. It probably won't end up being that close. Probably not a blowout, but I'm thinking that Florida State will win this one fairly easily. Uh, and then they get SMU at home. Uh, so they get an extra day to prepare and at home. SMU, this is their first year in the Power Four, joining the ACC this year. So maybe that's one Duke could pull off. But SMU, I think, is more ready for the Power Four than you might think they are. Uh, and then they have two road games in a row at Miami and NC State. Those are very unlikely for Duke to win either one of. Miami, I think this may be the year that they finally put together a good season and get their players to play together well as a team. I think they finally found their quarterback. And NC State, they're always decent. I know Duke beat them last year, but NC State, I think, is going to be quite a bit better than Duke this year. Uh, and then they take a week off before Virginia Tech at home. Uh, so I don't think there's that good of a chance of Duke winning this game. They might be able to do it, but I'm higher on Virginia Tech than I was when I first started doing these kind of videos. I think Virginia Tech will be a top 25 team this year, even though I didn't have them in my uh, way too early top 25. And they'll be, I think, one of the best teams in the ACC. And then they play on the road at Wake Forest. That's a winnable game, but it would have been nice to have that one at home and have maybe played Florida State on the road because they're probably not going to beat them anyway. But Wake Forest, I don't think is going to be very good either. So now I'll move on to the point spread prediction. So if you want to see more about how I do these point spreads, you can watch my first one of these, Ohio State. I explain it fully in that video. But games in the green are games where I think Duke will be a blowout favorite, which is 20 or more points. And there's one of those, Elon. And then games in the blue are games where I think Duke will be favored by double digits, 10 to 19 points. And there's two of those, Connecticut and Middle Tennessee. And games in the gray are games where I think Duke will be an underdog by about a field goal, so 1 to 5 points. And there's five of those: North Carolina, Georgia Tech, SMU, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. And games in the yellow are games where I think Duke will be an underdog by about a touchdown, so 6 to 9 points. And there's three of those: Northwestern, Miami, and NC State. And then games in the orange are games where I think Duke will be a double-digit underdog, but not a blowout underdog, 10 to 19 points. And there's one of those, Florida State. So Elon, Duke should be favored in that one by 30 something points. And then Connecticut, the spread in that one I think will be close to 20, but probably not quite 20. And then Middle Tennessee, I think the spread in that one, because it's on the road, will be more like 14 points. And North Carolina, I still think that even at home, North Carolina will be about a 3 point favorite probably over Duke. And then Georgia Tech, I'd say the spread in that one would be 3. And SMU, the spread of that one will probably be like 3. And then Virginia Tech, I think they'll be a 4 or 5 point favorite uh, mm, over Duke. And Wake Forest, I would uh, uh, think that Duke would be favored if it was the home game, but because it's a road game, I think Wake Forest may be favored by a point in that game or two. Uh, and Northwestern, I think they'll be about a 6 point favorite over Duke. And that, though, would be in the gray if it was at home. Uh, and Miami and NC State, I think the spread in both of those will probably be around 7. And in Florida State, I think the spread in that one will be about 10. Uh, so that will be it with this video. And please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. And I'll be back soon.